He waited until the snow was falling. He waited until the tree was lit. And then he handed her the envelope. Layla thought it was a deed to a vacation home or a trust fund for their unborn child. She was wrong. Inside wasn't a gift. It was a dissolution of marriage, effective immediately. Stephen Wells, the tech mogul of the year, was kicking his 8-month pregnant wife out onto the freezing streets of Aspen on Christmas Eve. He thought he had calculated every variable. He thought he was untouchable. But Stephen made one fatal error. He didn't know that the raggedy old department store Santa Claus watching from the sidewalk was actually the billionaire father Layla never knew she had. And he was about to buy Stephen's entire life just to burn it down. The silence in the penthouse wasn't peaceful. It was expensive. It was the kind of silence that costs $10,000 a square foot, the sound of triple-paned glass blocking out the howling wind of the Aspen blizzard outside. Layla sat on the edge of the oversized beige sofa, her hands resting protectively over the distinct swell of her belly. She was 8 months along. The doctors said it was a boy. She had already picked out a name, Leo. She hadn't told Stephen yet. She wanted to save it for tonight, their final Christmas alone, before they became a family of 3. She looked at the clock. It was 7:15 p.m. Stephen was late. Again. Layla shifted her back, aching. Being the wife of Stephen Wells, the CEO of Vertex Dynamics, meant you didn't complain about backaches. You smiled, you hosted galas, and you looked perfect in photos for the Wall Street Journal. But tonight, the facade felt heavy. The elevator doors chimed with a soft melodic ping. Layla brightened, struggling to stand up. Stephen. Stephen walked in, shaking the snow off his cashmere coat. He didn't look at her. He looked at his phone, typing furiously. Sienna, cancel the morning flight. I need the jet prepped for Zurich by noon tomorrow. He hung up and finally looked at his wife. His eyes were cold, like the ice forming on the terrace railing. There was no warmth, no Merry Christmas, no hand on her stomach to feel the baby kick. You're home, Layla said, trying to keep her voice steady. I asked Chef Henri to make that roast you like. And I have a present. Sit down, Layla, Stephen said. His voice was flat, transactional. He walked over to the marble kitchen island, poured himself a glass of scotch, neat, no ice, and didn't offer her anything, not even water. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick, cream-colored envelope. He slid it across the marble. It stopped right in front of her. What is this? Layla asked, a nervous laugh escaping her lips. Tickets. Open it. Layla's fingers trembled as she undid the clasp. She pulled out the document. The header was bold and undeniable, petition for dissolution of marriage. The room spun. Stephen, is this a joke? I don't joke about legal matters, Layla, he said, taking a sip of his drink. My lawyers filed it this morning. I wanted to give you the courtesy of telling you personally before the process servers arrive. Courtesy, Layla screamed, the shock turning into a sharp, hot panic. I'm 8 months pregnant, Stephen. It's Christmas Eve. Why? Stephen sighed, leaning against the counter, looking bored. It's a strategic realignment. My company Vertex is entering a merger phase with the Callaway Group. It's a multi-billion-dollar deal. The board feels that my image needs to be streamlined. A distracted father with a domestic life doesn't project the aggressive agility we need right now. I am not a distraction, Layla cried, tears finally spilling over. I am your wife. This is your son. It's a liability, Stephen corrected her, his voice chillingly calm. And honestly, Layla, the marriage has run its course. You were perfect for the start-up phase, sweet, supportive, decorative, but I'm in the major leagues now. I need a partner who understands power, not someone who spends all day knitting booties. He checked his watch. Sienna is waiting in the car. I'm staying at the Hotel Jarum tonight. You have 1 hour to pack your essentials and leave. Layla froze. Leave? This is my home. Technically, Stephen smirked. The prenup states that in the event of a felon, the primary residence reverts to the highest earner immediately. That's me. The prenup also states that infidelity voids your claim to alimony. Infidelity? Layla gasped. I have never looked at another man. Stephen shrugged. My security team has photos of you having lunch with your yoga instructor. It implies intimacy. It won't hold up in court forever, surely, but it will tie up your assets for about 2 years. By then, I'll be remarried. You monster, she whispered. I'm a businessman, Layla. Now please, don't make a scene. The security guards are coming up in 45 minutes to escort you out. If you're not gone, they'll remove you physically. He set his glass down, buttoned his coat, and walked toward the elevator. He paused just before the doors closed. Oh, and Layla. Don't try to use my credit cards. I cancelled them an hour ago. The doors closed. Layla stood alone in the $10 million penthouse. The Christmas tree lights twinkled mockingly in the corner. She looked down at the divorce papers, then at her stomach. I'm sorry, Leo, she sobbed, clutching her belly. I'm so sorry. She didn't pack clothes. She didn't pack jewelry. She grabbed her mother's old locket, her heavy winter coat, and walked out of the apartment before the guards could touch her. She took the service elevator down to the alleyway, stepping out into the biting cold of the Aspen night. The wind in Aspen cuts differently when you are poor. Layla had lived here for 3 years, wrapped in heated car seats and fur-lined boots, and she had never realized how violent the winter truly was. 2 hours had passed since she left the penthouse. Her phone was dead. Stephen had remotely bricked it. She had tried to use her debit card at a 24-hour pharmacy to buy water, but the terminal flashed declined. She was walking down East Cooper Avenue, the streets lined with luxury boutiques like Gucci and Prada, all glowing with warm golden holiday displays. Through the windows, she saw mannequins wearing dresses that cost more than most people made in a year. She felt a sharp cramp in her lower back. She gasped, leaning against a brick wall, her breath pluming in the air. Not now, Leo. Please, not now, she begged. She needed to sit down, but the benches were covered in snow. She stumbled toward a small park near the center of town. There was a gazebo there, usually decorated for the holidays. Sitting on the edge of the gazebo, sheltering from the wind, was a man. He looked like a disaster. He was wearing a Santa suit, but it wasn't the plush velvet kind you see in the movies. It was cheap, felt slightly too large for him. The beard was pulled down around his neck, revealing a face lined with deep wrinkles and a grey stubble that hadn't been shaved in days. He was smoking a cigar that smelled surprisingly expensive, contrasting with his ragged appearance. Layla hesitated. Stephen had always told her to avoid the riff-raff. Stephen isn't here, she reminded herself, and Stephen is the devil. She limped into the gazebo and sat on the bench opposite the Santa. She wrapped her coat tighter around her belly. The man didn't look up immediately. He took a long drag of the cigar, staring at the snow. Rough night? He asked. His voice was gravelly, like stones grinding together. But there was an accent buried underneath something refined. Perhaps British or mid-Atlantic, hidden beneath a roughness. Layla wiped her eyes. You could say that. Christmas Eve is the worst time for bad news, the man said. He finally looked at her. His eyes were startlingly blue, piercing intelligent, and completely at odds with his cheap costume. You look like you just lost a war, kid. I lost my life, Layla said, her defenses crumbling. My husband, he threw me out. Tonight. The man's eyes narrowed slightly. He looked at her stomach. He threw a pregnant woman out in 20-degree weather. He has a merger. Layla said, the absurdity of the words tasting bitter on her tongue. He said I was a liability. He cancelled my cards. I have nowhere to go. The Santa chuckled, but it wasn't a happy sound. It was dark. Business. It's always business. Men like that. They think money is a shield that protects them from consequences. He reached into a red sack sitting next to him. Layla flinched, expecting him to pull out a bottle of cheap liquor. Instead, he pulled out a thermos. Hot chocolate, he said. It's not poisoned, I promise. My name is Artie, by the way. Layla took the thermos with shaking hands. I'm Layla. Layla, Artie repeated, testing the name. He seemed to freeze for a split second, a flash of recognition crossing his face, but it vanished as quickly as it came. That's a good name. Strong. She drank. It was rich, dark chocolate, piping hot. It brought a little bit of life back into her frozen limbs. So who is this husband of yours? Artie asked, leaning back and crossing his legs. Must be a big shot if he thinks he can dump a wife like garbage in this town. Stephen Wells, Layla said. Vertex Dynamics. Artie dropped his cigar. It hissed as it hit a patch of snow on the gazebo floor. Stephen Wells, Artie said slowly. The boy wonder, the tech genius. Do you know him? I know of him, Artie said. He bent down to pick up the cigar butt, his face hidden in the shadows. I know he's trying to close a deal with the Calloway Group. Rumor on the street is that old Arthur Calloway is a ghost. No one has seen him in 10 years. Stephen thinks he's dealing with a board of directors, but Calloway still holds the veto power. Layla nodded, though she didn't care about business anymore. Stephen said he needed to be single to impress the Calloway family. Apparently they are traditional, but he told me he needed to look agile. Artie snorted. Agile? That's corporate speak for ruthless. Let me tell you something, Layla. I used to be in business a long time ago. Before I put on this red suit. He gestured to his outfit. Real power isn't about agility, Artie said, his voice dropping an octave, sounding suddenly commanding. Real power is about loyalty. A man who betrays his wife while she carries his heir. That's not a man. A guy like Arthur Calloway would do business with. That's a man Calloway would crush for sport. Layla looked at this strange old man. He was shivering slightly, but his posture was straight. Why are you out here, Artie? She asked. It's Christmas Eve. Don't you have family? Artie looked away, staring out at the darkened streetlights. I made mistakes, Layla. Big ones. I chased the money just like your Stephen. I lost the only woman I ever loved because I was too busy building an empire. By the time I realized what I had done, she was gone. Died in a car accident 25 years ago. I heard she had a daughter, but I was too much of a coward to find her. I thought she was better off without a monster like me in her life. Layla felt a pang of sympathy. I'm sorry. My mother died in a car accident too, around the same time. I grew up in foster care. The air in the gazebo seemed to stop moving. Artie turned his head, slowly. He looked at Layla, really looked at her. He studied the curve of her jaw, the shape of her nose, the specific shade of hazel in her eyes. His hands resting on his knees, clenched into fists. "What was your mother's name?" Artie asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Sarah," Layla said softly. "Sarah Jenkins?" Artie closed his eyes. He took a long, shaky breath. When he opened them, the tears were there, glistening in the reflection of the Christmas lights. "Sarah," he whispered. "Did you know a Sarah?" Layla asked. Artie didn't answer the question. Instead, he stood up abruptly. He dusted off his red pants. The slouch was gone. The tiredness was gone. He stood 6 feet 2 inches tall, imposing and energized. "Layla," Artie said, and this time his voice sounded like it could command armies. "You need a place to stay." "I have no money, Artie." "I know a place," he said, "and I have a feeling your luck is about to change. Stephen Wells thinks he's the king of this town. He thinks he can treat you like an expired contract." Artie reached into his pocket and pulled out a phone. Not a burner phone, but a sleek, customized satellite phone that looked more expensive than Stephen's car. "Artie, who are you?" Layla asked, shrinking back slightly. He dialed a number and put the phone to his ear. "It's me," Artie said into the phone. "Bring the car, the Phantom, and call the legal team. All of them. Wake them up. I don't care that it's Christmas Eve. We're going to war." He looked down at Layla and for the first time smiled. It was a terrifying, beautiful smile. "Come on, my dear. Let's go get you some warm clothes. You have a gala to crash tomorrow." The vehicle that pulled up to the curb wasn't just a car. It was a rolling fortress of wealth. A Rolls-Royce Phantom jet black gliding silently over the snow-packed streets. The Spirit of Ecstasy hood ornament seemed to cut through the freezing air like a silver blade. Layla stared. "Artie, whose car is this?" "Did you steal it?" The man in the cheap Santa suit didn't answer. A driver impeccably dressed in a dark suit, despite the hour and the holiday, stepped out and opened the rear suicide door with a gloved hand. "Mr. Calloway," the driver said, bowing slightly. "We received your signal. The team is assembling at the estate." Layla froze, 1 foot on the plush lamb's wool floor mat. "Calloway, Artie. Why did he call you Calloway?" The man sighed, the sound heavy with decades of regret. He stepped inside, offering his hand to help her in. The interior of the car smelled of aged leather and polished wood warmth enveloping them instantly. "Artie was a nickname Sarah gave me," he said softly, as the car pulled away, leaving the twinkling lights of Aspen behind and heading toward the secluded, ultra-exclusive estates on Red Mountain. "My name is Arthur Calloway." Layla pressed her back against the seat, her heart hammering against her ribs. The baby kicked hard as if sensing her adrenaline. "Arthur Calloway, the billionaire investor. The man my husband is trying to merge with. The man your husband was trying to merge with," Arthur corrected, his voice hardening. He pulled the cheap fake beard off his face, tossing it onto the floor of the Rolls-Royce like trash. Beneath it, his jaw was strong, set in grim determination. "That deal is dead. Stephen just doesn't know it yet." "I don't understand," Layla whispered, her mind reeling. "Why were you in the park dressed like that? Why did you ask about my mother?" The car turned through massive iron gates that bore a stylized sea. A sprawling mansion lit up like a castle loomed ahead. It was 10 times the size of Stephen's penthouse. Arthur didn't look at her. He looked straight ahead. "Every Christmas Eve for 25 years I wear that suit," I go to a different town, sit in the cold, and remember what it felt like when I had nothing but ambition. It's my penance. I left your mother, Sarah, because I thought I wasn't good enough. I thought poverty would kill our love. So I went out to conquer the world, promising I'd come back when I was worthy." He turned to Layla, his blue eyes swimming with unshed tears. "By the time I made my first million, I hired an investigator to find her. He told me she died in a crash on icy roads. He told me there was a baby, but that the system had swallowed her up. Closed adoption records, dead ends. I have spent infinite amounts of money trying to find that child." The car stopped. The silence in the cabin was deafening. "Layla," Arthur said, his voice cracking. "You have her eyes. You have Sarah's eyes." Layla put a hand over her mouth, a sob escaping. The foster homes, the feeling of never belonging, the desperate need to create a perfect family with Stephen. It all crashed down on her. "You're my father," she barely whispered. "I am the man who failed you," Arthur said gravely. "But I swear to God, and on your mother's memory, I will never fail you again. And I will never let anyone hurt you or that boy in your belly again." The door opened. "Come inside, Layla. You're home." The next 4 hours were a blur of surreal opulence. Layla was whisked into a master suite larger than her entire first apartment. The bathroom featured a soaking tub carved from a single piece of amethyst. Arthur didn't let her rest long. "We have work to do," he had said. While Layla showered, washing away the scent of Stephen's scotch and the aspen cold, Arthur had mobilized an army. When she emerged wrapped in a robe made of Egyptian cotton, the bedroom looked like a high-end department store had exploded inside it. Racks of gowns were wheeled in. 3 stylists, a makeup artist, and a hairdresser, all flown in via helicopter from Los Angeles on triple-time holiday pay, were waiting. "What is all this?" Layla asked, overwhelmed. Arthur walked in. He had showered and shaved. He was wearing a tuxedo that fit him perfectly, making him look like the titan of industry he was. "Stephen is holding the Vertex Christmas Gala tomorrow at noon at the St. Regis," Arthur said. "He thinks he's celebrating his freedom and his impending merger. We are going to crash his party." "Arthur, Dad, I can't—" Layla stammered the word Dad, feeling alien on her tongue. "I'm 8 months pregnant. I look like a whale. I've been crying for hours. I can't face those people. They all think I'm a cheating gold digger because that's what Stephen told them." Arthur walked over and placed his hands on her shoulders. He looked at her in the towering mirror. "Look at you," he commanded. "You are not a victim, Layla. You are a Calloway. We don't hide. When someone tries to burn our house down, we buy the bank that holds their mortgage and evict them." He gestured to the stylists. "You aren't going there as Stephen's discarded wife. You are going as my daughter, the heir to the Calloway Empire. You need armor." The stylists went to work. They massaged the tension from her face with cryoglobes. They applied makeup that highlighted her cheekbones and concealed the heartbreak in her eyes, making them look fierce instead of sad. They tried on 5 dresses. The first 4 were lovely pastel safe, the kind of dresses Stephen liked her in. Arthur shook his head. "No, she's not a flower. She's fire." The head stylist nodded and pulled a garment bag from the very back of the rack. She unzipped it. It was crimson silk, a deep blood red that shimmered like liquid rubies. It was expertly tailored, designed specifically for maternity wear, hugging her pregnant form in a way that made it look powerful, almost regal rather than cumbersome. It had a dramatic off-the-shoulder neckline and a train that pooled like lava around her feet. When Layla put it on, she didn't recognize herself in the mirror. The woman staring back wasn't the meek housewife who begged Stephen for affection. She was a queen carrying a future king. Arthur stepped up behind her and placed a necklace around her neck. It was a cascade of diamonds and rubies that felt heavy and cold against her skin. "This was supposed to be your mother's wedding gift," he said softly. "Now it's yours. It's war paint, my dear. Let's go show Stephen Wells what a real liability looks like." The St. Regis Aspen Resort was glittering. The ballroom for the Vertex Dynamics Christmas Gala was decorated with enough silver and crystal to blind anyone walking in without sunglasses. It was noon on Christmas Day, and the champagne was already flowing freely. Stephen Wells stood near the center of the room, under a massive chandelier, holding a flute of Dom Perignon. He felt light, untethered. The unpleasantness with Layla the night before was already a distant memory, a piece of data he had deleted from his hard drive. Sienna, his sleek and ambitious assistant, was by his side, laughing a little too loudly at his jokes. "You seem relaxed, Stephen," Roger Sterling, a board member, noted, clapping him on the back. "Ready for the Callaway merger?" "It's in the bag, Roger," Stephen said smoothly, scanning the room. "I've streamlined my personal life. The Callaway board will appreciate the dedication. Old man Arthur Callaway values focus above all else." "Have you heard from Callaway?" Roger asked. "Nobody has seen the guy in a decade. Some people think he's dead, and his lawyers are just running the show." "He'll show up to sign the papers," Stephen said arrogantly. "Everyone shows up for $10 billion. He was about to propose a toast to himself when the ambient noise in the ballroom suddenly dropped. It wasn't a gradual quieting. It was an instant, stunned silence that rippled from the massive double doors at the entrance all the way to the stage. Stephen frowned, annoyed at the interruption. He turned toward the doors. Standing in the archway framed by the snowy light from the lobby was a vision in crimson. Layla. But it wasn't the Layla he had thrown out last night. That Layla was broken, tear-stained, wearing an ugly puffer coat. This Layla was a deity. The red dress clung to her pregnant belly like a badge of honor. The diamonds around her neck caught the chandelier light and sent prisms dancing across the walls. Her hair, usually tied back in a sensible bun, to avoid annoying Stephen, tumbled around her shoulders in glossy waves. She didn't look sad. She looked furious and utterly magnificent. A murmur ran through the crowd. Cameras previously pointed at Stephen swiveled toward her. Stephen's jaw clenched. How dare she? How dare she show her face here, pregnant and defiant, trying to ruin his moment? And where did she get those diamonds? They looked real. He excused himself from Roger and Sienna and marched toward her. His face a mask of controlled rage. He met her in the middle of the dance floor, the crowd parting around them like the Red Sea. "What are you doing here?" "Layla," he hissed, keeping his voice low so the donors couldn't hear. "You're trespassing. I told you it's over. Did you steal that jewelry? I'll have you arrested." Layla looked at him, really looked at him. For the first time in 3 years, she saw the smallness of him, the insecurity behind the expensive suit. "Merry Christmas, Stephen," she said, her voice clear and bell-like in the silent room. "I'm just here to return something." She reached into a small crimson clutch purse and pulled out her wedding ring. It was a large diamond, cold and flawless, just like Stephen. She dropped it into his champagne flute. It made a sharp clink against the crystal. "Keep it," she said. "You'll need it to pay your legal fees." "Security!" Stephen snapped, turning to the perimeter of the room. "Get this woman out of here. She's mentally unstable." 2 large security guards started toward her. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." A deep voice boomed from the doorway. The entire room turned again. A man walked in. He was older, silver-haired, carrying himself with an air of authority that made Stephen look like an intern. He was dressed in a tuxedo that cost more than Stephen's car. The older members of the board gasped. Roger Sterling dropped his glass. It shattered on the marble floor. "My God," someone whispered. "It's a ghost." Stephen stared. He recognized the face from old business magazines he studied in college. It was older, lined with age, but unmistakable. Arthur Calloway. Stephen breathed, his confidence evaporating instantly. Arthur walked past the security guards without acknowledging their existence. He walked straight to Layla and placed a protective arm around her shoulders. He glared at Stephen with a hatred so intense it felt like heat radiation. "Mr. Wells," Arthur said, his voice projecting to every corner of the ballroom. "You seem confused. You asked security to remove a trespasser. But you are speaking to my daughter." The gasp that went through the room sucked all the oxygen out of the air. Stephen blinked, his brain misfiring. "Daughter what?" "No, that's Layla. She's nobody. She's a foster kid from Ohio. Her name is Layla Jenkins." "Her name," Arthur corrected, his voice shaking the chandeliers, "is Layla Calloway, and she is the sole heir to the Calloway Group estate. The baby she is carrying, the baby you threw out into a blizzard last night, is my grandson." Arthur stepped forward, crowding Stephen's space. "You wanted a merger, Stephen. You wanted to know if I valued agility, I value loyalty, I value family. And you, sir, have none." Arthur pulled a document from his inside pocket. It looked suspiciously like the merger agreement Stephen had spent 2 years drafting. Arthur tore it in half, then in quarters, and let the pieces flutter to the floor around Stephen's expensive Italian shoes. "The deal is dead, Stephen. Vertex Dynamics is dead. By tomorrow morning, my team will begin acquiring a controlling interest in your company, and my first act will be to dissolve the board and fire you for gross misconduct and moral turpitude." He turned to the stunned audience. "Enjoy the champagne, everyone. It's the last thing Stephen Wells will ever buy you." Stephen stood frozen, a man watching his own execution. He looked at Layla, his eyes pleading for her to say it was a joke, a misunderstanding. Layla just smiled, a cold, dazzling smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You were right about one thing last night, Stephen," she said softly. "I am going to be a liability. Your liability. Forever." The silence in the Rolls-Royce as they drove away from the St. Regis was heavy, but it wasn't the silence of fear anymore. It was the silence of a bomb having just detonated. Layla leaned her head against the cool leather headrest, her hand instinctively going to her belly. The adrenaline that had sustained her during the confrontation was fading, replaced by a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. "You did well," Arthur said, pouring a glass of sparkling water from the car's console and handing it to her. "You held your ground. Sarah would have been proud." Layla took the glass, her fingers trembling slightly. "He looked small. I always thought he was a giant, Arthur. But standing there, he just looked like a scared little boy." "Bullies always do when you take away their toys," Arthur grunted, checking his phone. "The video of the confrontation is already trending. 3 million views in 10 minutes. The red dress is the #1 topic in the country." Layla closed her eyes. "I don't want to be famous, Dad. I just want to be safe." "You will be," Arthur promised. But Stephen won't go quietly. A narcissist never accepts defeat, They rewrite reality until they are the victim. We need to be ready for the backlash. Arthur was right. Back at the Vertex Dynamics headquarters, Stephen Wells was not packing his bags. He was destroying his office. He swept a row of awards off his mahogany shelf, sending glass and metal crashing to the floor. Sienna, his assistant, stood by the door, clutching a tablet to her chest, looking terrified. "Get me Grant!" Stephen screamed, his face purple with rage. "Get me the entire legal team, and get me Veronica from crisis management, now!" "Grant is on the line, sir," Sienna squeaked. Stephen snatched the phone. "Grant, you saw it. You saw what that old fossil did to me." "I saw it." "Stephen." Grant's voice was calm, the voice of a lawyer who charged $1,000 an hour. "It's a disaster. The stock price has dropped 40% in an hour. The board is calling for an emergency vote of no confidence." "Stop the vote," Stephen barked, "and fix this." "She's lying. That old man is senile. Calloway has been a recluse for a decade. We can claim he's mentally incompetent. We can claim Layla manipulated him. Maybe she isn't even his daughter. She's a con artist, Grant. She conned me into marriage, and now she's conning him." "Stephen," Grant warned. "DNA tests are easy to procure. If she really is Calloway's daughter, attacking his mental state is a dangerous game. He has more money than God." "I don't care about his money," Stephen lied. "I care about my company. Listen to me. The baby. The baby is the key." There was a pause on the line. "Go on." "That child is Calloway's grandson," Stephen said, a twisted smile forming on his lips as he paced over the shattered glass. "Then that child is the heir to the Calloway fortune, and I am the father. If I have custody, I control the heir. I control the trust." "You signed away your rights in the divorce petition, Stephen. You literally called the child a liability." "I was under duress," Stephen shouted. "I was stressed. I was having a breakdown." "Spin it. Grant, I'm a loving father who was pushed away by a mentally unstable wife. She kidnapped my unborn son. I want an emergency custody order. I want full conservatorship over Layla until the baby is born. If she's Calloway's daughter, she has money. If she has money, I want half of it. The prenup works both ways, doesn't it?" Stephen hung up and turned to Sienna. "Call the Daily Chronicle," he said, smoothing back his hair and adjusting his tie. "Tell them I'm ready to give an exclusive interview. The headline should be, 'Billionaire Heartbreak, How a Gold-Digging Wife and a Crazy Old Man Stole My Company and My Child.'" The war began the next morning. Layla woke up in the master suite of the Calloway estate to the smell of fresh lilies and impending doom. When she turned on the TV, Stephen's face was plastered on every channel. He looked haggard. He had deliberately messed up his hair and worn a simple sweater instead of a suit. He sat in a chair, wiping a fake tear from his eye. "I just want my son back." "TV," Stephen sobbed to the reporter. "I tried to protect Layla. She's had mental health struggles. I filed for divorce because I thought it would shake her out of it, force her to get help. But then this man, this Calloway, swooped in. He's brainwashed her. I'm terrified for the safety of my unborn child." Layla threw the remote at the wall. It shattered. "He's lying," she screamed. "He threw me out in the snow." Arthur walked in looking grim. He was followed by a team of lawyers who looked like sharks in human suits. "We know he's lying," Arthur said calmly, "but the public loves a tragedy. He's playing the victim card." "He wants custody, Layla," one of the lawyers, a sharp-eyed woman named Jessica said. "He filed an emergency motion this morning. He's claiming you are unfit to parent due to emotional instability and lack of resources. He's asking the court to grant him custody of the child immediately upon birth." "He doesn't want the baby," Layla cried, clutching her stomach. "He wants the connection to the money. He called Leo a liability." "We know," Arthur said, "but the courts move slowly, and Stephen is throwing mud to see what sticks. He's also frozen the assets of Vertex Dynamics to prevent us from acquiring it. He's trying to bleed us out." Arthur sat on the edge of the bed and took Layla's hand. "He made one mistake, though," Arthur said, his eyes gleaming with a cold, predatory light. "He challenged me in the press. He made this a public spectacle. He forgot that I own the media companies he's crying to." Arthur stood up. "Jessica released the security footage." "Which footage, sir?" "The penthouse footage," Arthur said. "The cameras inside the apartment. Stephen thinks he owns the security system, but the company that installed it, I bought them this morning. We have the cloud backups." 2 hours later, the narrative shifted violently. A video leaked online. It was grainy, black and white, but the audio was crystal clear. It showed Stephen standing in the kitchen, sipping scotch. "It's a liability," Stephen's voice sneered from the screen. "I need a partner who understands power, not someone who spends all day knitting booties. If you're not gone, they'll remove you physically." The internet exploded. The sad dad facade crumbled instantly. And Stephen Wells. A monster replaced the red dress as the top trend, but Stephen was like a cockroach. He survived the nuclear blast. That afternoon, a process server arrived at the Calloway estate gates. He wasn't allowed in, but he taped a document to the intercom box. It wasn't a custody hearing. It was a lawsuit against Layla. Stephen was suing her for paternity fraud. He was claiming in a new filing that Layla had slept with Arthur Calloway for money, that Arthur was her sugar daddy, not her father, and that the long-lost daughter story was a fabrication to steal Stephen's company. It was disgusting. It was vile. And it was enough to stress Layla to the breaking point. She was reading the headlines on her phone, "Is she his daughter or his lover?" Sick twist in Aspen drama when the pain hit. It wasn't a cramp this time. It was a tearing sensation, sharp and hot, radiating down her legs. Layla gasped, dropping the phone. "Dad?" Arthur was there in a second. "Layla, something's wrong," she whispered, her face going grey. "The baby. I can't feel him moving. And there's blood." The private medical wing of the Aspen Valley Hospital was locked down. Security guards stationed by Arthur Calloway patrolled the hallways, turning away reporters who were trying to sneak in, dressed as nurses or janitors. Inside room 402, the atmosphere was frantic. Monitors beeped with an irregular, terrifying rhythm. "Her blood pressure is spiking," Dr. Aris shouted, checking the monitors. 180 over 110. She's going into eclampsia. We need to deliver this baby now, or we lose both of them. Layla was barely conscious. The pain was a blinding white wall. She could hear voices, but they sounded like they were underwater. "Arthur," she moaned, reaching out a hand. "I'm here, sweetheart," Arthur said, gripping her hand so hard his knuckles were white. He was crying, the powerful billionaire reduced to a terrified father. "I'm right here. You're going to be okay." Don't let him take Leo," Layla whispered. "Over my dead body," Arthur growled. "Sir, you need to step out," Dr. Aris said. "We're moving to the OR for an emergency C-section. Code Blue protocols." Arthur was ushered out into the hallway. The doors swung shut, cutting him off from the only family he had left. He paced the corridor, his expensive shoes clicking on the linoleum, praying to a god he hadn't spoken to in years. Then the elevator pinged. Arthur turned, expecting coffee or news. Instead, the elevator doors opened to reveal Stephen Wells. Stephen was flanked by 2 police officers and his lawyer, Grant. He looked frantic, but there was a smugness in his eyes. He held a piece of paper in his hand. "Where is she?" Stephen demanded, marching toward the nurse's station. "I have a court order. I have the right to be present for the birth of my child." Arthur stopped pacing. He stood in the middle of the hallway, blocking Stephen's path. "Get out," Arthur said. His voice was low, devoid of emotion. It was the voice of a man who was contemplating murder. "Step aside, old man," Stephen sneered, waving the paper. "This is an emergency injunction. Judge Miller signed it an hour ago. I am the father. I have medical power of attorney if Layla is incapacitated. If she's under anesthesia, I make the decisions for the child. She is dying in there because of you." Arthur said, his hands balling into fists. "That's unfortunate," Stephen said, feigning sympathy. "But if she dies, then the baby is solely mine. And since the baby is your heir, well, we'll be seeing a lot of each other, won't we? Arthur Grandpa." Something inside Arthur snapped. The veneer of the civilized businessman vanished. The Santa Claus from the park, the man who had nothing to lose, resurfaced. Arthur didn't yell. He didn't call his lawyers. He simply stepped forward and drove his fist into Stephen's jaw. It was a solid, sickening crunch. Stephen crumbled to the floor, blood spurting from his nose. "Hey!" one of the police officers shouted, grabbing Arthur. "Sir, you're under arrest for assault." "I don't care," Arthur said, not resisting as they cuffed him. He looked down at Stephen, who was groaning on the floor, clutching his broken face. "If you take one step into that delivery room, Stephen, I will buy this hospital and have them turn off your life support." "Arrest him," Stephen gargled, spitting blood. "He's a maniac." "Take him away," Grant the lawyer said nervously. As the officers dragged Arthur toward the elevators, he shouted back at the nursing staff. "Protect her. Do not let that animal near her." The elevator doors closed, leaving Stephen on the floor, triumphant. He wiped the blood from his lip and stood up, shaky, but determined. "Grant," Stephen said, his voice nasal and thick. "Get the doctors. I want to see my son." Stephen pushed past the stunned nurses and slammed his hand against the button to open the OR doors. "Sir, you can't go in there. It's a sterile field," a nurse screamed. "I have a court order," Stephen shouted, shoving the nurse aside. He burst into the operating room. The scene was chaotic. Doctors were shouting, machines were screaming. There was blood. Too much blood. "Stephen!" Layla's weak voice drifted from the table. She was half conscious, her eyes fluttering. "I'm here, Layla," Stephen said, walking toward her, ignoring the surgeons, yelling at him to leave. He looked down at her. "I'm here to take charge. You've made a mess of this." "Get him out," Dr. Aris roared. "Security!" "I have a right," Stephen yelled. Then a sound cut through the chaos. A cry. Thin, reedy, but undeniable. The surgeon lifted a small, wriggling bundle into the air. "It's a boy," the surgeon said, relief washing over his voice. "He's small, but he's breathing." Stephen's eyes locked onto the baby, his ticket to the billions, his leverage. "Give him to me," Stephen commanded, holding out his hands. "I am the father." The surgeon hesitated, looking from the bleeding mother to the maniac in the suit. Suddenly, The heart monitor attached to Layla changed its tone. The fast beeping turned into a single, long, continuous drone. Beep, beep, beep. "We're losing her," the anesthesiologist shouted. "She's coding crash cart now." "Give me the baby," Stephen screamed, lunging forward. Dr. Aris stepped between Stephen and the child. He looked at the court order in Stephen's hand, then at the dying woman on the table. "Get the hell out of my OR," Dr. Aris said, his voice shaking with rage. "Or I will kill you myself." Security guards finally burst in, tackling Stephen. He fought them, screaming about his rights, screaming about the money, as they dragged him out of the room. The last thing Stephen saw before the doors swung shut was the doctors shocking Layla's chest, her body jolting on the table, while his son cried alone in a plastic bin. Stephen was thrown out into the hallway, right next to where his blood still stained the floor. He straightened his jacket. He touched his broken nose. "She's dying," he whispered to Grant. A slow smile spread across his bruised face. "If she dies, I win everything." The sound of the flatline was the loudest thing in the world, a singular high-pitched note that signaled the end of a universe. Inside the operating room, time fractured. Dr. Aris moved with desperate precision. "Charge to 200 clear." Layla's body jerked on the table, lifeless and pale. The heart monitor didn't change. The green line remained a flat, unwavering horizon. Again. "Charge to 270. "Come on, Layla," Dr. Aris shouted, sweat dripping from his brow. "Clear. Thump. Silence." Then a stutter on the screen. A jagged peak. Then another. Beep, beep, beep. "Sinus rhythm," the anesthesiologist breathed out, slumping against the wall. "She's back. BP is stabilizing." Dr. Aris didn't celebrate. He looked at the devastation the trauma had caused. "She's in a coma," he said quietly. "We saved her life, but we don't know if she's ever going to wake up. Get her to the ICU and put a guard on the door. No one gets in, especially not the husband." 3 days later, Arthur Calloway sat on the metal cot of the Pitkin County Jail, his tuxedo ruined, waiting. The heavy steel door clanged open, and the police captain walked in, looking pale. "Mr. Calloway," the captain said, "the charges have been dropped. Self-defense. And frankly, nobody wants to keep Arthur Calloway in a cage while his daughter fights for her life." Arthur stood up immediately. "How is she?" "Alive, but she hasn't woken up," the captain replied, unlocking the cell. "But you should know Stephen Wells has been petitioning the court every hour. He's claiming that since you were incarcerated and Layla is comatose, he is the default guardian. He's trying to take the baby today at noon." Arthur checked his watch. It was 10:00 a.m. He didn't go to the hospital to weep. He went to war. Arthur's driver took him straight to Vertex Dynamics. The hostile takeover Arthur had threatened was underway, but he needed a faster weapon. He needed a kill switch. He bypassed the terrified security guards in the lobby and took the elevator directly to the server floor. He cornered the IT director, a young man named Kevin. "Kevin," Arthur said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "You can work for a man who abandoned his pregnant wife, or you can work for me. If you work for me, your salary triples starting today. I just need one thing, the deleted archives." Kevin didn't hesitate. He typed furiously, bypassing the encryption he had written himself. "I have it, Mr. Calloway." Arthur scrolled through the data. His eyes narrowed. It wasn't just infidelity or cruelty. It was federal crimes. Stephen had been cooking the books to make Vertex look solvent for the merger, embezzling $40 million from the employee pension fund to pay for his lifestyle. Arthur smiled a cold, terrifying expression. "Print it. All of it." The Pitkin County Courthouse was packed. Reporters from every major network crammed into the back, captivated by the story of the billionaire Santa and the comatose heiress. Stephen Wells sat at the plaintiff's table, wearing a neck brace and a bandage over his nose, playing the victim perfectly. "Your Honor," Grant Stevens' lawyer began, "this is a simple matter of biology. My client is the father. The mother is in a persistent vegetative state. The grandfather has a history of violence. We ask for immediate full custody of the infant Leo and control over the mother's medical decisions." Judge Miller looked at Stephen. "Mr. Wells, anything to add?" Stephen stood up, wincing theatrically. "I just want to take my son home, Your Honor. I forgive Arthur for attacking me. I just want to heal this family." "Mr. Calloway," Judge Miller asked, "do you have a defense?" Arthur stood alone at the defense table. He walked to the center of the room and placed a thick stack of papers on the judge's bench. "I do not object to the father having custody," Arthur said calmly. The room gasped. Stephen's head snapped up, shock replacing his fake sadness. "I do not object," Arthur continued, his voice hardening, "provided that the father is not currently under federal indictment for securities, fraud, embezzlement, and grand larceny." Stephen froze. "What is this?" Judge Miller asked, flipping through the documents. "That is the financial history of Vertex Dynamics," Arthur declared. "Mr. Wells has stolen $40 million from his own employees. It is a federal crime." Arthur turned to the back of the room. Two FBI agents in dark suits stood up. "Stephen Wells," Arthur roared, "you wanted the money, you have to earn it. But there is one more thing." Arthur pulled a remote from his pocket and pointed it at the evidence screen. "You claimed you loved her. You claimed she pushed you away." He pressed play. The grainy audio from the hospital security camera filled the silent courtroom. "Grant, she's dying. Stephen, if she dies, I win everything." The silence in the room was absolute. Stephen's face went white. "That's a deep fake. He doctored it," he screamed, scrambling to his feet. "And one last witness," Arthur announced, turning toward the heavy oak doors. The doors swung open. A collective intake of breath sucked the oxygen out of the room. Rolling in a wheelchair pushed by Dr. Aris was Layla. She was pale, weak, and wrapped in blankets, but her eyes were open. In her arms, a sleeping baby boy was swaddled in blue. "Layla," Stephen whispered, backing away as if he were seeing a ghost. You're in a coma." Layla looked at him. She didn't shout. She simply spoke into the microphone Dr. Aris held for her. "I woke up this morning, Stephen," she said, her raspy voice cutting through the air. "Dr. Aris told me everything. He told me you tried to force your way into the OR while I was dying. You didn't ask about me. You only asked for the baby." She looked down at her son. "You don't want a son, Stephen. You want an asset. But this asset is already spoken for." "Your Honor," Layla said to the judge, "I'm filing for an annulment based on fraud, and I'm filing for a restraining order." "He's already arrested," the FBI agent called out, stepping over the railing. Stephen bolted for the side exit, panic overtaking him. He made it 3 steps before the bailiff tackled him to the carpet. "Get off me! Do you know who I am?" Stephen screamed, his nose breaking for the second time in 3 days. "I am Stephen Wells. I am a billionaire." Arthur Calloway stood over him, looking down with pity. "Actually, my team just finished the acquisition of Vertex. We bought the debt. You are bankrupt, Stephen. You have nothing. Not a wife. Not a son. Not a penny." As they dragged Stephen out, kicking and screaming, the courtroom erupted into applause. Arthur bent down and kissed Layla's forehead, then touched the baby's cheek. "Let's go home, Layla." 1 year later. The Calloway estate was buried in fresh snow, but inside the fire was roaring. The Christmas tree was 20 feet tall, shimmering with vintage ornaments. Layla sat on the floor, laughing, as 1-year-old Leo tore open a box. He was a happy child, with Arthur's blue eyes and Layla's warm smile. Arthur sat in his armchair, smoking a cigar. He wasn't wearing a Santa suit this year. He didn't need to do penance anymore. He had found his redemption. Layla stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the driveway. Alongside the Rolls-Royce sat a sensible minivan. She was busy running her new foundation for single mothers. She was happy. Stephen was currently serving a 15-year sentence in a federal prison in Colorado. He spent his days writing lawsuits that nobody read. Layla turned back to her father. "Merry Christmas, Dad," she said. Arthur smiled, raising his glass. "Merry Christmas, Layla. To family." "To family," she repeated. The wind howled outside, but inside the fortress was warm. Layla Calloway was no longer a liability. She was unbreakable. Layla's story reminds us that true wealth isn't found in bank accounts. It's found in loyalty and the courage to stand up when the world tries to knock you down. Stephen Wells thought money made him invincible, but he learned the hard way that you can never truly bankrupt a person who has love on their side. Did this story keep you on the edge of your seat? If you enjoyed Layla and Arthur's victory, please smash that like button. Share this video with a friend who loves a good drama, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a twist. Thanks for watching.